Sign here if you want the job. The folder landed on the table with a slap. Inside, a 6-month consulting contract worth $2.4 million. Vivienne Okafor didn't reach for it right away. She looked up slowly from the chair across the desk, studying the man who'd just tossed it at her like a takeout menu. Preston Waller had no idea who she was, and that was about to cost him everything. Nashville, Tennessee, February, the kind of cold that makes old buildings groan. Vivienne Okafor was 34 years old, Nigerian-American, with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses. She kept tucked in the collar of a coat that had seen better years. She drove a 2009 Honda Civic with a cracked rear bumper and a parking permit from a community college she no longer attended. She carried her lunch in a reusable grocery bag from a Kroger 2 blocks from her apartment. She looked, to most people who saw her, like someone's assistant. She was not anyone's assistant. What nobody in the lobby of Waller Capital Group knew, what nobody had bothered to find out, was that Vivienne Okafor had spent 7 years as a senior restructuring advisor at one of the 3 largest private equity firms in the country. She had turned around 4 failing hospital systems, 2 regional airline companies, and 1 mid-size manufacturing conglomerate that the financial press had declared clinically dead. Her name appeared in case studies at Wharton and Kellogg. She had testified before the Senate Finance Committee at age 29. She left that world 3 years ago when her mother was diagnosed with early-onset dementia. She moved back to Nashville, found a small firm that let her work reduced hours, and spent her evenings driving her mother to appointments, making sure she ate, sitting with her on the back porch watching the neighborhood dogs go by. She wore the old coat because she didn't think about clothes anymore. She drove the old car because she didn't think about cars. She thought about her mother. She was back in the full-time consulting market now, just barely. The firm she'd worked with had dissolved. Her mother had stabilized. The savings were running thin. She had applied for 3 positions in the past 2 weeks. This was the 3rd interview. Waller Capital Group managed roughly $800 million in regional commercial real estate. Preston Waller was 52, white, with the kind of haircut that cost $90 and the kind of handshake that told you he knew it. He'd built the company in his mid-30s, had his face on 2 magazine covers, and had recently acquired a portfolio of mixed-use development properties in 4 southeastern cities that he did not fully understand. His internal team had flagged structural inefficiencies in the portfolio's debt servicing model. A board member had insisted he bring in an outside advisor. Preston had agreed, reluctantly. He did not like outside advisors. He had not looked at Vivienne Okafor's resume before she walked in. His assistant had scheduled the meeting. He'd assumed it was another McKinsey type in a sharp suit who'd charge him $400 an hour to tell him things he already knew. What walked through the door looked nothing like that. "Mrs. Okafor," he said, not standing. "Have a seat." She sat. He glanced at her coat, at the grocery bag she'd set on the floor beside her chair, at the glasses tucked in her collar. Something moved behind his eyes. A calculation, and then he leaned back and crossed his arms in that particular way that meant the decision had already been made. "Walk me through your recent work," he said. The tone was the kind a person uses when they're not really listening. Vivienne walked him through it. Concise, specific, no filler. She cited portfolio restructuring timelines, debt-to-equity ratios, turnaround benchmarks. She mentioned 2 of the hospital systems by name. Preston Waller typed something on his phone while she spoke. "Right," he said when she stopped. "And your current firm is dissolved. I've been independent for about 4 months." He nodded slowly. The nod of a man filing something under confirmed. "Here's my concern," Preston said, folding his hands on the desk. "What we're dealing with is a fairly complex multi-city portfolio. The debt architecture alone is. It requires someone who's operating at a certain level, actively, not someone who's been He paused, choosing his word with visible care. Transitioning. Vivienne looked at him steadily. "I understand. I'm not saying your background isn't." Another pause. "I'm sure it's been a strong career. Has been past tense. I appreciate your time, he said, and reached for the folder on his desk. I do want you to look at something before you go. Our compliance team put together a summary of the portfolio's current situation. Since you're here, you might as well give us your read. Fresh eyes. He slid it across. Take a few minutes. It was a test. A small one. The kind a person gives when they want to confirm their instincts. Vivienne took the folder. Opened it. Read it. Preston checked his phone. 4 minutes passed. Your Greenville properties, Vivienne said, are cross-collateralized against the Memphis debt tranche in a way that isn't showing up in your summary, which means your actual exposure on the Memphis scenario is about $11 million higher than this document reflects. And your Nashville mixed-use block is operating under a zoning variance that expires in 9 months. If you renew late by even 30 days, you trigger a covenant violation on the lending agreement for the Chattanooga site. Preston Waller looked up from his phone. Page 4, Vivienne said, setting the folder back on the desk. She did not say it smugly. She said it the way someone states a fact that exists independently of whether it is believed. Preston stared at the folder. He opened it to page 4. His jaw moved slightly, the way a jaw moves when a man is doing arithmetic he doesn't want to believe. How? He stopped. Started again. That cross-collateralization. Our legal team didn't. It's buried in the addendum of the Memphis Bridge Agreement. Most people miss it. The language is ambiguous by design. The lender benefits from the ambiguity. Silence in the room. Preston Waller set his phone face down on the desk. For the first time since she'd walked in, he looked at her. Actually looked at her. Not at the coat or the grocery bag. At her. That's a $4 million exposure gap, he said quietly. Closer to 4.3 if Memphis trends where it's trending. Another silence. He reached into his desk drawer and produced a clean copy of a contract, slid it across the table with both hands this time. 6 months. Full access to the portfolio team. I want to start Monday. Vivienne looked at the contract. I have one condition, she said. Preston leaned forward almost imperceptibly. What's that? Monday I meet with the full board, not just the portfolio team. I need authority to communicate findings directly, not filtered through your internal team. If the board hasn't seen the Memphis exposure, they need to hear it from me. Preston was quiet for a long moment. The moment of a man deciding whether his pride was more expensive than his problem. Done, he said. She signed. She picked up her grocery bag from the floor and walked out. In the elevator, she'd let out a breath she'd been holding since page 1 of that folder. Her hands were steady. They always were. But Vivienne Okafor had made a mistake. Not a professional one. A personal one. She had not asked enough questions about Preston Waller before she walked in that door. She had read the public filings, the press coverage, the board composition. She had not read the culture. And cultures, she had learned years ago, were written between the lines. In who got seed on emails, in where people sat at meetings, in the look on a man's face when a woman in an old coat corrected his legal team's blind spot. What she had seen in Preston's eyes when she closed that folder wasn't respect. It was threat assessment. She found that out on Wednesday. She arrived at Waller Capital at 8 a.m. for her first day of full access. The portfolio team meeting was scheduled for 9. At 8:47, Preston's assistant, a young man named Davis, who blinked too fast when he talked, appeared in the doorway of the conference room where she'd been reviewing files. Mr. Waller wanted me to let you know, Davis said, not making eye contact. The board meeting has been moved. It'll actually just be internal team today. He thinks it's better too, he said. Get aligned internally before going upward. Vivienne looked at him. The condition of my contract was direct board access from day 1. Davis blinked. Right, he mentioned that. He said he'd revisit the timeline. She said nothing for a moment. Then, thank you, Davis. He left quickly. At 9, she walked into the portfolio team meeting and took a seat at the far end of the table. 5 people, mostly men. 1 woman, mid-40s, named Sandra Chu, who was head of asset management, and who had the look of someone who'd spent years being the most competent person in rooms that didn't acknowledge it. The meeting opened with Preston at the head of the table. He presented the portfolio overview as if she weren't there. Occasionally, he'd refer to the outside perspective we've brought in without using her name. When he opened the floor for questions, he looked at everyone except her. After 20 minutes, she spoke. The Greenville cross-collateralization needs to be on the agenda. Today, not next quarter. The room shifted. 3 sets of eyes flicked to Preston. "We'll get there," Preston said, his voice light. "I want to establish baseline understanding first. We're past baseline. The exposure is active." She pulled a single sheet from her folder and slid it toward the center of the table. "I'd like Sandra's team to validate these numbers by end of week so I can include them in the board report." Sandra Chu reached for the sheet before Preston could respond. "I'll have it by Thursday," Sandra said, not looking up. Preston said nothing, but something behind his eyes hardened like concrete setting. The pattern accelerated after that. Over the next 2 weeks, Vivienne was given access to files, but the wrong files. Outdated versions, with key addenda missing. When she flagged it, Davis delivered a revised set that was slightly less incomplete than the first. Meetings she was supposed to attend were rescheduled without notice. One call with the Nashville development partners happened without her, though her name was on the agenda. After the third scheduling issue, Vivienne did what she always did with a complex problem. She stopped reacting and started documenting. A notebook, blue cover, college ruled. She'd used the same kind since her first year at the firm, a habit her mentor, a woman named Dr. Isabel Fenton, had insisted on. Write it down, all of it. Dates, names, what was said and what wasn't. The thing you document today is the thing that saves you 6 months from now. Vivienne documented everything. She also called Isabel Fenton that Friday evening, standing in her kitchen while her mother watched television in the next room. "Tell me what you're seeing," Isabel said. Vivienne told her. Isabel was quiet for a moment. Then, "He knows you're right. That's the problem." "I know. The danger isn't that he thinks you're wrong. The danger is that he can't let you be right in front of people he's been managing for years. You're going to make him look like he's been missing things. He has been missing things. I know that. You know that. He knows that. That's what makes him dangerous, Vivienne." A pause. "Who else is in that building?" Sandra Chu. "Is she the kind of person who documents?" Vivienne thought about the way Sandra had reached for that sheet before Preston could object. "Yes," she said. "She is good. That's your witness. Not your ally yet. Your witness." Vivienne stayed up late that night reviewing everything she'd put in the notebook. Her mother knocked on her door at 11:30 and asked if she wanted tea. Vivienne said yes. They sat at the kitchen table together for a while without talking, the way they'd learned to sit. Her mother's memory drifting in and out like a radio signal, and Vivienne just being there. In the morning, she drove to her office an hour early and wrote 2 emails. The first was to Davis, formally requesting, in writing, the complete and current file sets for all 4 portfolio cities, citing specific document numbers from the contract's scope of work clause. The second was to the board member who had initially pushed for an outside advisor, a woman named Dr. Patricia Chuen, whose name Vivienne had found in the annual report. She introduced herself, outlined her scope of work, and noted that she was encountering access delays that might affect the timeline of her findings. She kept the tone neutral, factual, professional. She hit send on both at 7:14 a.m. By 9, Preston Waller was standing in her doorway. He closed the door behind him. He was wearing the smile he used in magazine photos. "You emailed Patricia Nguyen." "I did. She's a board member, Vivienne. We have a process for board communications. The contract specifies direct board access. I referenced the clause in my message to her, Abia. Right. But there's..." He paused. "There's a relationship dynamic here you might not fully appreciate. Patricia and I have history. It's a sensitive, Preston." She said it the way you say someone's name when you need them to stop talking. Quietly, without hostility. "I'm going to do the work I was contracted to do. That includes the board communication. If there are relationship dynamics that affect the engagement, they should be disclosed in writing so I can account for them in my methodology. His smile didn't move, but his eyes did. A small change. The kind that comes before something. Of course, he said. He left. That afternoon, Vivienne received a revised contract addendum from Waller Capital's legal team. 3 new clauses. One required all board communications to be pre-approved by Preston's office. One restructured her timeline, pushing deliverables back by 6 weeks. One contained language about alignment with company culture and communication norms that was vague in a way that was clearly intentional. She sent a copy to Isabel Fenton without comment. Isabel called back in 11 minutes. "Don't sign it," she said. "I wasn't going to." "Good. Send it to Marcus Webb. Tell him I referred you." Marcus Webb was a contract and employment attorney in Nashville. He reviewed the addendum that evening and called Vivienne at 8:01 p.m. "This is retaliation for exercising your contractual rights," he said. "Clean and simple. The board communication clause directly contradicts the terms you signed. If they insist on this addendum, they're in breach." "What do I do?" "Nothing yet. You let me send a letter. We note the contradiction, decline the addendum, and put them on notice that you'll be exercising your full contractual rights as originally agreed. We copy Patricia Nguyen. That will accelerate things." "Yes," Marcus said. "That's the idea." The letter went out Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, Preston Waller had called an emergency leadership meeting without Vivienne. By Thursday evening, Davis had left a voicemail informing her that her access badge had been temporarily deactivated for a system update. By Friday morning, Waller Capital's communications director had quietly reached out to 2 financial journalists with a tip about an outside consultant whose unconventional methods had caused disruption to the firm's operations. One journalist ran it. A brief item, unnamed sources. Waller Capital navigating advisor conflict. No details, but the implication clear enough to anyone in Nashville's business community. Vivienne read it on her phone at her kitchen table, her mother's breakfast going cold beside her because she'd gotten distracted. She put the phone down. She looked at her mother. "Everything okay?" her mother asked. "Yeah, Mom." She picked up the fork and helped her with the eggs. "It's going to be fine." She believed it. Not because she was certain of the outcome, because she had the notebook and Marcus Webb and Sandra Chu's Thursday email confirming the Greenville numbers, which matched Vivienne's projections within a margin of 0.3%. And because she had Dr. Patricia Nguyen, who had responded to Vivienne's original message with a single line, "I'd like to schedule a call. When are you available?" The call happened the following Monday. 45 minutes. Vivienne walked Patricia through everything: the cross-collateralization exposure, the Nashville zoning window, the Chattanooga covenant risk, and the documentation of access delays she'd experienced since day one. Patricia Nguyen asked 3 questions, all of them precise, all of them the questions of someone who had been waiting for a reason to ask them. "Miss Okafor," she said near the end of the call, "I want to be direct with you. I pushed for this engagement specifically because the internal team flagged concerns that were not being acted on. What you've found in 3 weeks confirms those concerns. And then some. I'm going to call an emergency board session. Dada, well push back. Dada, Preston reports to this board," Patricia said. Not the other way around. He sometimes forgets that. The board session was called for the following Wednesday. Vivienne spent the weekend preparing. She worked at the kitchen table, her notebooks and laptops spread out, her mother coming through periodically to refill her coffee and ask what she was working on. "Something that matters," Vivienne told her. Her mother patted her hand and went back to the television. Wednesday morning, Vivienne arrived at Waller Capital at 7:45. Her badge worked. She didn't ask questions. She walked to the boardroom, set up her presentation, and sat down. The board came in at 9. 6 members. Preston was the last to enter. He looked at the setup. He looked at Patricia Nguyen. Something passed through his face, a calculation he'd run too late. He sat down. Vivienne presented for 40 minutes. No filler, no hedging. Numbers, exposures, timelines, risks. She included the documentation of access delays in an appendix, framed not as complaint but as material information that had affected the engagement's efficiency. She noted the unsigned addendum and its contradiction with the original contract. She ended with a 3-point remediation plan. Concrete steps, 60-day timeline, expected outcomes. When she finished, the room was quiet. Preston spoke first. His voice was careful, controlled. I think what the board is seeing here is a situation that's been characterized in a certain way. There's context that Patricia Nguyen's voice was even, not unkind, absolute. The Greenville exposure was real. The Nashville zoning window is real. These were flagged internally 6 months ago and not acted on. Ms. Okafor found both in her first week. A pause. I'd like the board to vote on adopting the remediation plan. The vote was 5-1. Preston Waller voted no. He was the one. Afterward, in the hallway, Sandra Chu stopped beside Vivienne near the elevator. She didn't make a production of it. She just said quietly, "I've been at this firm for 9 years. That's the first time I've seen anyone walk in there and make them actually look at it." Vivienne nodded. "You're the one who confirmed the numbers." "I know." Sandra paused. "He's going to make this difficult for you. He already has." Sandra looked at her. "You're going to be okay?" "Yes," Vivienne said. "I am." She meant it. The fallout moved faster than Vivienne expected. By Thursday morning, Preston had contacted 2 executive search firms, placed consulting advisors across Nashville's business community. He told them, conversationally, that Waller Capital had experienced a difficult engagement with an advisor. No name, but enough description, and that it had ended badly. He framed it as a cautionary tale about cultural fit. He mentioned it to the director of the Nashville Commercial Real Estate Alliance at lunch. He mentioned it to his college roommate who ran a private family office. He was not filing a lawsuit. He was doing something quieter, and in many ways more damaging. He was building a story. Marcus Webb heard the first version of it from a colleague by Friday afternoon. He called Vivienne immediately. "It's starting," he said. "I know." She'd already heard from one contact that morning. A polite email, a consulting opportunity that had seemed promising 2 weeks ago, now going quiet. "Defamation's hard to prove in this industry," Marcus said. "Conversations at lunch, recommendations withheld, it leaves no paper trail. But if we can document pattern and effect, how long does that take? Months, if we're lucky." Vivienne sat with that for a moment. "There's another option," Marcus said carefully. Patricia Nguyen's board can issue a formal engagement report. A public one. If the board documents what you found and the remediation outcome, it creates a public record of your work's validity. It neutralizes the narrative before it takes root. Would Patricia do that? "I think," Marcus said, "you should ask her." She called Patricia that evening. Explained what was happening, what she was asking for and why. Patricia was quiet for a moment. "He's doing this because you embarrassed him. He's doing this because he thinks I can't afford to fight back." Another pause. Then, "Give me until Monday." Monday came. Patricia Nguyen called at 9 a.m. The board voted to issue a formal letter of engagement, a public record documenting the scope, findings, and outcomes of your work with Waller Capital. It goes to the Nashville Business Registry and the Commercial Real Estate Association of Tennessee. Preston voted no. He was again the one. Vivienne closed her eyes for a moment. "It posts Wednesday," Patricia continued. "I also want to tell you something personally. I had a conversation this morning with a former Waller Capital employee, a woman who left 2 years ago. Her name is Renata Solis. She had an experience very similar to yours. Different context, same pattern. A pause. She's been waiting for a reason to come forward. She has documentation." Vivienne didn't speak for a moment. "She'll need to talk to Marcus Webb," she finally said. "I've already given her his number." The formal engagement letter posted on Wednesday. By Thursday, Renata Solis had given a detailed statement to Marcus Webb. By Friday, 2 more former contractors of Waller Capital had reached out independently. Both women. Both had documentation. Both told nearly identical stories about access restriction, contract manipulation, and quiet reputational damage afterward. Marcus filed a civil complaint on behalf of all four women the following Monday. Tortious interference, defamation, gender discrimination in professional engagement. The filing was specific, documented, and deeply sourced. Waller Capital's legal team moved to suppress. The motion failed. Preston Waller issued a public statement calling the filing baseless and politically motivated. His communications director posted it on the company's social channels. By the following morning, it had 200 shares. Vivienne's formal engagement letter, circulating in Nashville's business community through Patricia Nguyen's network, had 4,000. Preston's attorney called Marcus Webb that Thursday. They talked for 90 minutes. The settlement conference was scheduled for 6 weeks out. Vivienne did not attend. She was teaching a Saturday morning workshop at a small nonprofit on the east side of Nashville that offered free financial literacy courses to women in career transition. The director had seen her engagement letter and called. She'd said yes. She stood at the front of a small room, folding chairs, fluorescent lights, donated projector, in front of 11 women ranging from 22 to 61. She wore the same old coat she'd been wearing all winter. She hadn't thought to buy a new one. She spent the first 30 minutes on one concept: the difference between your value and how you're perceived. Those two things aren't the same, she said. They feel like they should be. They aren't. Your value is what you know, what you've built, what you're capable of. Your perception is what people assume when they walk in the room and see what you're wearing, or what you drive, or what your zip code is. And here's the thing most people get wrong. She paused. Perception is their problem to manage, not yours. Your job is to be so sure of your value that their perception doesn't have space to operate. A woman in the second row, mid-30s, raised her hand. What if they use the perception against you? Like professionally? Then you document, you build your record, you find your witness. Vivienne smiled. And you call Marcus Webb. A few people laughed. Most wrote it down. After the session ended, a young woman, maybe 23, holding a notebook in both hands, came up to her. How did you stay calm? She asked. When he was doing all of that, how did you not just react? Vivienne thought about it. Because reacting was what he needed from me, she said. My reaction would have been the story. Instead, I made the facts the story. The young woman nodded, wrote that down too. Waller Capital settled 8 weeks after the complaint was filed. The terms were not disclosed, but Vivienne's engagement contract was honored in full, including the completion fee. Preston Waller resigned from the CEO position 4 months later. A brief statement cited a desire to pursue other opportunities. The Nashville Business Chronicle noted the departure in a single paragraph. Preston gave no interviews. He was not quoted. The East Side Financial Literacy Workshop ran its second session the following month. 14 women attended. The third session had 22. By the end of the year, Vivienne had partnered with 2 community organizations across Nashville to expand the program, and Dr. Patricia Nguyen had joined the advisory board. Renata Solis went back to work. 2 of the other women in the complaint did as well. And Vivienne Okafor was sitting in her car in the parking lot of the community center after a Saturday session when her phone buzzed. An email, a formal introduction from a mid-sized development firm in Memphis, referred by Patricia Nguyen, looking for a senior restructuring advisor. She read the email twice. Then she looked through the windshield at the gray Nashville sky. She thought about the folder Preston Waller had slid across the desk like a takeout menu. The way he'd checked his phone while she read it, the look in his eyes when she got to page 4. She thought about her mother's hand on hers at the kitchen table. She started the car. I want to talk to you for a second, not about Vivienne's credentials, not about the lawsuit, about the coat. She wore that coat every day to Waller Capital, old coat, cracked bumper, grocery bag on the floor, and every single time she walked through that lobby, someone made a judgment. Not based on what she knew, based on what they saw. And here's what I think about that. I think most of us have been that coat. Maybe not a coat. Maybe it was your age, or your accent, or your neighborhood, or your resume gap, or the fact that you didn't go to the right school, or you took time off to take care of someone you loved. Maybe someone looked right through you and decided before you even opened your mouth. I want to know about that moment, the one where someone looked at the surface and missed everything underneath. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and I mean that. If Vivienne's story hits something in you, share it. Send it to someone who's been sitting across a desk from a man checking his phone while they speak. Let them know the page 4 moment is coming. And subscribe, because next week's story is about someone else who learned the hard way that what a person carries inside is never written on the outside. One thing I want you to take with you: you don't have to announce your value. You don't have to defend it. You don't have to convince the people in that room before they're ready to see it. Do the work. Document everything. Know your worth down to the decimal point. And when they get to page 4, they'll know it too.